So unless that specific problem is there, the technique either becomes useless or doesn't apply. Power loops tend to be more generalist. In other words, they're things that will be useful no matter what the problem, or no matter what the outcome you're trying to achieve. So if you're an educator and you want to educate, if you're a parent and you want to raise your children, if you are a therapist and you want to help people overcome problems, if you're a manager and you want to develop a talent in someone, if you're a salesperson and you want to enthuse someone, no matter what your outcome is in hypnosis, you should be able to use similar sets of power loops in each of those environments and still get the outcome that you want. Of course, there'll be specific power loops which will focus on your particular niche as well, but there'll be general power loops that will still transform the individual and still help both of you achieve what you want to achieve. And that is what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, there are many different kinds of power loops that we'll be looking at, and we'll look at a whole list of the kinds of things that you should develop power loops for in due course. But for today, I want to focus on possibly one of the most important ones, because no matter what area of human interaction you're involved in, there is one thing that always will either assist or get in the way of people getting their outcomes, of people achieving certain things. And that is self-esteem. Whether you're a parent, a therapist, a teacher, a manager, a salesperson, it doesn't matter who you are, what your field of activity is. If the person that you're facing has a poor or weak self-esteem, it's going to be harder to get a sort of win-win outcome with that person and get what you want and help them to get what they want at the same time. If you help strengthen their self-esteem, and maybe even link that strengthening of self-esteem to whatever other outcome you have, be it learning something new, be it developing new skills or talents in the workplace, be it overcoming a certain problem or fear or anxiety, whatever it is they've come to you for, if you can run them through a self-esteem set of power loops, you will help them at the same time achieve those other outcomes at the same time. Because people with stronger self-esteem learn quicker, they develop skills more quickly, they overcome problems more easily because they dare to do certain things. So self-esteem is going to be one of the most fundamental power loops you'll develop. There will be others, and we'll discuss what themes will be useful in due course. But for today, I want to focus purely on self-esteem because it's possibly one of the most powerful ways to transform someone. So in the same way as your core induction is usually close your eyes, go into hypnosis, go deeper, so there are certain cores to self-esteem that will have to exist within your power loops so that you can help someone build more self-esteem. Now, let's start off by looking at the different types of suggestions we've already discovered in order to create our loops. So we have, of course, simple suggestions, we have process suggestions, we have mini loops, and we have power loops. And each one is a natural progression from another. In other words, simple suggestions get put together to create a process suggestion. Process suggestions get put together to create mini loops get put together to create power loops. So we'll start right at the beginning. So what I'd like for this is to have a couple of volunteers. Who would like to volunteer for this?
I'll volunteer if you like.
Excellent, David, that's one. Let's have another one. Remember, diving into the deep end here as a volunteer is going to get your skills going way up high because your mind suddenly gets thrown into the deep end to do something. So whoever is the second person to volunteer, is going to get the most out of the session. So who else is going to volunteer for this?
Yeah, okay, I'll go again.
Excellent, Sean, fantastic. So we have Sean and David on the line. Now, I'm going to throw you in a little bit at the deep end in order to start the ball rolling, and it's going to get your mind sort of warmed up, if you like. In the same way when we talked in the previous masterclass about storytelling, there's certain ways to get your mind to get ready to do things. I'm going to throw you in the deep end. I don't really mind or care so much as to whether or not you have the right answer. What I care about is that you engage in the process of trying to find a good answer. Does that make sense to both of you?
Yep.
Excellent, good. So, remember, our ultimate aim is to create power loops, hypnotic power loops, to develop self-esteem, or to help someone develop self-esteem. Now, before we can create power loops, we must start with the basic building block, which is a simple, direct suggestion. So what I want you guys to tell me examples of simple, direct suggestions which will help someone or are designed to help someone bolster or strengthen their self-esteem. What kind of things would you suggest someone in hypnosis to strengthen their self-esteem?
You'll feel better about yourself.
Excellent, you'll feel better and better about yourself. What other things? Sean, would you like to give us one?
You can allow yourself to start feeling more positive.
Perfect, okay, so you start feeling more positive. Because people who feel good about themselves and people who feel positive tend to have a stronger self-esteem, right? Same thing of all kinds of other things. Say confidence, you'll have more confidence. You can be proud of yourself. Okay? Give me some more examples of simple, direct suggestions designed specifically to bolster self-esteem. Go for it.
You'll value yourself.
You value yourself, Sean?
You'll notice yourself being less critical.
You become less critical of yourself. Excellent. Okay? So, Would it be fair to say that it's not rocket science and it's not really difficult to come up with simple, direct suggestions to boost self-esteem? Would that be a fair comment to make?
Yep. Yeah.
Excellent. So now let's see if we can get a little bit more tricky about this. Let's see if we can have some indirect suggestions to bolster self-esteem. Remember, indirect suggestions get at self-esteem indirectly by implying self-esteem or putting them in a position that if the position is true, self-esteem will have been assumed. In other words, self-esteem has to happen. So what kind of indirect suggestions might you be able to make to develop self-esteem? These are a little bit more tricky, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me give you some examples of what I mean. If you tell someone, and you have achieved so much, I'm not really giving them a suggestion about how he should feel about himself, but notice how there's an implication about the whole idea of achieving something. People who achieve a lot, there's a sense of I'm suggesting that you can be proud in some way, or something else like that can happen. Another example, you are as unique as your fingerprint. Now again, there's no direct suggestion to feel better about themselves, to have strong self-esteem, to feel good about themselves, or anything like that. And yet, if someone says to you, you are as unique as your fingerprint, there is a clear implication that you should feel good about yourself because of that uniqueness, that you are special in some way. Would that be fair to say? And please, anyone on these calls right now, feel free to jump in if what I'm saying does not match with your experience. So everyone happy with the indirect suggestion style?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now we're going to take the next step forward. Now that we know how to use simple suggestions, either direct or indirect, it doesn't matter which one, now we can put them together into little process instructions. So process instructions are little processes that will result in getting the outcome that you want. Now, we're moving away from the suggestion element now, in other words, what actually are you saying, and more at what things are you aiming at. Here's an example of what I mean. If I say to you, or if I ask you to remember a pleasant memory, is that more likely to help strengthen your self-esteem or make your self-esteem become weaker?
I guess it depends whether if they turn around and say,
okay, it appears we've lost Sean. So anyone else feel free to jump in on here. So if you get someone to remember a pleasant memory, let's assume that they actually manage to access that pleasant memory. Is it likely to bolster their self-esteem or take away from their self-esteem?
It's Paul here. I would guess it'd be more likely to boost self-esteem, but as perhaps Sean was about to say, I guess it would depend on the actual memory itself.
Absolutely. If it's a positive memory, it will have a tendency to boost or bolster self-esteem. So, there are 3 kinds of processes that we could look at in terms of helping people to strengthen their self-esteem. Now, I'm going to give you some example processes, and then I'm going to ask you guys to maybe come up with some of your own. Let's look at some purely therapeutic outcomes, okay? What is the purpose of a therapeutic self-esteem process or set of suggestions? Well, the purpose is to take away pain in some form, to take away self-doubt or a problem, right? So the whole point of therapeutic loops will be to find a problem and somehow fix it so that the person has more self-esteem at the end of it. So let's think of some ways that you can create that process. Now, if I tell you if I suggest to you in hypnosis that as the days and the weeks and months go by, you'll think of happy memories more and more often, is that going to bolster your self-esteem? Likely or unlikely?
More likely.
Excellent, I would agree. Okay, so now let's say we ask someone to go back to a unpleasant memory, a bad memory, and take the lessons from it, learn from it, so that they don't have to feel bad anymore. Now, is that likely to strengthen their self-esteem or weaken their self-esteem? Assuming now that they go through the process as suggested, in other words, there's no complications along the way.
I guess that would also improve self-esteem.
Absolutely, right? Because you're taking away problems. Let's have another example. You get someone to start in a safe place, you get them to go through an unpleasant experience until the unpleasant experience is all over, and then they go back to pleasant experiences. So it starts and finishes with pleasant experiences. The lesson being, of course, that all bad things come to an end. This too will pass. Is this likely or to boost self-esteem or detract from self-esteem?
I guess it depends on the experience. I get the impression, obviously, if you can see all bad things end, then yes, that would improve one's self-esteem. But you can at least more than survive such experiences.
Precisely.
However,
now this is important, and thank you, Paul, for giving a qualified yes to that, because you're absolutely right. All these processes that we're talking about right now depend on one simple thing. That is that each step of that process has been completed as intended. Now, this is important because now you have the structure of how mini loops create power loops. If I say to you, start in a safe place, remember, now go through a bad memory, now finish in a safe place, now draw a lesson from that, which is to say that the lesson is that all bad things come to an end. And I repeat that process until you have that lesson. I have given you a set of mini loops. The first mini loop is find a safe place. The second mini loop is go through an unpleasant memory in a safe way, taking that sense of safety with you. The third mini loop is finish in a safe place until everything's okay again. The fourth mini loop is draw a lesson from it. Now, do you see how put together that creates a power loop? That gives you a process, a hypnotic process you can take people through using your hypnotic language, and we'll find out how to construct that in a moment. But it takes you very clearly from a process where you had, say you had 100 bad memories which were causing you problems. Now you have 99 bad memories that cause you problems because one's been resolved. So now you have stronger self-esteem because there's less standing against it. Now, the reason this is important is because you now have steps to go through. And understanding the difference between mini loops and power loops, you understand that you stick with that mini loop that you happen to be on until that mini loop is actually finished. So there's no point moving on from a place of safety, say, which is one set of mini loops, until they're actually in a place of safety, until you see all the physiological signs that they're calm, that they're relaxed, that they're tranquil, that they're feeling safe, etc. If that step hasn't been achieved properly, there's no point going to the next step, which is about getting them to re-experience an unpleasant memory from a different perspective. And there's no point moving on from that onto the final step until they can re-experience that. So if they can't even access that memory, there's no point going on to the final bit because there's no lesson to be drawn from it yet. So do you see how mini loops have precise, small, but very precisely defined outcomes that you must be able to hit and achieve? And if you hit those outcomes, if you achieve those outcomes, then you move on to the next mini loop. And when you hit that outcome, you move to the next mini loop until all your mini loops in one particular chain have been hit, and you have your power loop done and dusted. And with each person that you work with, your power loops will be shorter or longer depending on which mini loops you have to re-emphasize or de-emphasize given where they happen to be at. So now this takes a lot of guesswork again out of your hypnosis because you know what to do. This is just one set of processes we looked at. We've looked at therapeutic loops for self-esteem. But what if you don't want to be a therapist? What if you just want to help people live a better life? Say you're a coach or a manager, okay? Well, there are what I would call existential self-esteem loops you can create. They're more about your experience of life. So you might run someone through a process where you suggest to them that they should start feeling good for no apparent reason, just spontaneously start feeling good. Or what if you run someone through a process which has the effect of letting everyday things like flipping a light switch, brushing your teeth, etc., make them think of happy memories or make them feel good spontaneously as soon as they brush their teeth, flip a light switch, tie their shoelaces, speak to their boss, or whatever it happens to be. Notice that these now, whilst they can be used in therapy as well, are more about your general existence. So if your philosophical background is less therapeutic but more about, hey, let's just live life, you can create power loops to fit that philosophy as well. Likewise, let's say you're a more spiritual counselor or you're working with someone who has a more spiritual orientation. You can take those philosophical ideals and use those again in order to construct loops, power loops, which will help them build their self-esteem. So what do we talk about in sense of metaphysical power loops? Well, getting someone to realize that they are unique and that they have value is something which is going to build their self-esteem. How do you do that? Well, we'll have a look at that in a moment. You can get someone to remember their own authenticity, their center, their core self, why they value certain things in life. And the more they get in touch with things that they value in life, the more their sense of self-esteem will be boosted. These are the pillars of self-esteem. What makes you feel self-esteem is knowing who you are, that you have value. Is knowing what you value in life, and because you value things, you tend to become more valuable as well. So these are more metaphysical, tending towards slightly more spiritual ideas, but still are very powerful. So notice again, whether you want to go down the nitty-gritty therapeutic process of resolving problems, where you want to be existential and just help people enjoy a better life, or you want to go more the spiritual route and give people a very strong rooted sense of identity, of purpose within the world, within life, it doesn't matter. Each one of these is already implying certain ways of building that self-esteem. And of course, this can be mapped across to any kinds of context in which you need to create power loops.